Greetings, everyone. Good evening, and welcome back to another amazing episode of the show, D-Live, the Convo series. Tonight, we are going to be live with actually not only Cincinnati and Hamilton County renowned, but nationally renowned Jennifer Branch. Quite frankly, and I don't think I'm being hyperbolic at all, Jennifer, one of the top civil rights attorneys in the country. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that and a number of the cases that you've been involved in, but one in particular that's kind of near and dear to my heart. And we want to hear more about you and your background, and also plans for Hamilton County Common Pleas Court. Election day is in a week, although many people have voted already and continuing to vote in record numbers early, which is amazing, but you're running for Common Pleas Court judge here in Hamilton County, Ohio. And with that being said, I know probably a lot of folks have some questions for you, perhaps. So please feel free, anybody, drop a question or a comment into the chat or the response. We're live here on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So please feel free to do that, and we'll touch on those. And with that being said, we've got a number of people joining us now. So Jennifer, welcome to the show this evening. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Derek. And thanks for getting this scheduled before everybody is finished voting.
Indeed. Well, I wanted to have you on a couple of weeks ago, and I ran into some technical difficulties, but I'm glad because I know you're very busy, and we got you back on the show, which is fantastic. So thank you. And, you know, as we do, people like to hear a little bit more about folks and where they come from, why they're passionate about the things that they're passionate about. And so what can you tell us? Share a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I was raised by my parents, and I have an older sister who lives in Cincinnati with me now. My parents taught us to champion the underdog, to embrace and meet people who are different from us, and to be fair to everybody you meet and treat everybody with respect, especially strangers. And, you know, my parents were two very different people. My mom grew up in suburban area outside of Pittsburgh. She went on to an Ivy League college education. She was Jewish, and she worked in an advertising agency in New York City. My dad was raised in the inner city. He was Catholic. He did not have the benefit of going to good schools, and he ended up working full-time and going to school part-time for 9 years to get his college degree. And they met at the advertising agency where my mom was the executive and my dad was the receptionist.
I love that. I love that. Breaking those gender role models at an early age.
Yeah, that was in the 1950s. And they were married for 45 years. My mom died. And my parents just, they wanted us to grow up thinking and being like them, to embrace people who are different. And my parents were Democrats, and my mom took me campaigning at the age of 4, and I got great feedback because people like patted me on the head and told me how cute I was, because I was working for, can you believe I was working for a levy to get the school, my elementary school built, and it passed. I got to go to that school. And then my dad was a precinct executive, and I would, when I was a teenager, I would love driving around with him and handing out sample ballots. So I feel like I've been a Democrat. I've been engaged in politics my whole life. And, you know, I just really wanted to be a lawyer since I was a little kid. And I wanted to, when I went to law school, I knew I wanted to do things where I would help people. That's what, you know, being a lawyer is a really hard job. And I would like to do that for people I really cared about. So I started here in Cincinnati at the Legal Aid Society. And that was 33 years ago. And I worked at Legal Aid for, yeah, I know. I worked at Legal Aid for 9 years, and then I took a year off to be a campaign manager for Mark Longabaugh, he ran for city council, and then he ran for Congress against Steve Chabot in the first district, and that was in 1996, and we lost. So then I started working with Al Gerhardstein and his partner doing civil rights litigation, which I've been doing for the last 23 years. And I really love doing the civil rights cases because I'm representing people who've been discriminated against. You name the basis, I represented them. Race, gender, sexual harassment, disability. One of my favorite cases against the Ohio Civil Rights Commission for discriminating against their own employee.
Are you serious?
Yep, and they made us
there's so much irony in that.
Yeah, they tried in front of a jury, and they lost terribly because they were clearly discriminating against our client who was disabled, and they wouldn't accommodate her. It's pretty simple and straightforward.
Wow.
She got her job back, and she worked. She's still working there. So the discrimination employment cases I really love represented Felicia Barnes, right? The transgender Cincinnati police sergeant who was promoted to sergeant and then got discriminated against and demoted. And we took that to trial and won in front of a jury for her. And she had the choice to take her job back, but she retired from the CPD eventually. And then, of course, all the cases we do for police misconduct, not just against the city of Cincinnati. We've certainly had cases, the cases that started the collaborative agreement, but also the cases for people who have been killed by the police, people who die in prison because they don't get the care that they need. I remember representing a woman in state prison who had breast cancer, misdiagnosed, told her she had a cyst and to go away. And by the time it was finally diagnosed, she was at stage 4 and didn't survive. So these are the cases that I've taken because, and I worked, and it gets me out of bed in the morning because I think I'm making a difference, and that's really what I was raised to do.
Right. And you mentioned to me that even today, here you are a week out from your election, but you're hard at work, and it looks like you're in the office now. I'm not sure exactly where you're at, but that you've been working all day today on cases, even up till now.
Yeah, I started at 6:30 this morning.
Wow, that's a long day.
This is my new home office. This is my pandemic home office. So yeah, it's hard work, but I've enjoyed it. And people want to know, well, if you enjoyed so much, Jennifer, and you feel like you're making a difference, why are you leaving? Why are you going to stop being a lawyer? And 2020, a year ago when I made this decision, 2020 looked like the year to run because there are 13 candidates running, the 13 Democrats running against 13 Republicans for these judicial seats, where we've never been able to do that before. Have every single Republican opposed by a Democratic candidate. And I chose that because I think that'll make not just the difference for me being on the bench making decisions in cases that I hear, but all of us, if we all can get elected, the whole slate, that could change everything at the courthouse. We have known since 1999 that Ohio has racial disparities in the criminal justice system, which we don't call justice system, we call the criminal system. And we know that our jury pool is too narrow, that we could have a more diverse jury. And you know what it would take? Like a one sentence resolution by the judges that we will expand the jury pool. How many of those are in favor? I say aye. It's done. But they haven't done it. And
wow.
It's that was 20 some years ago, that was 21 years ago. Bail reform, people being locked up because they're poor. That's the only reason that they're in jails, because they're poor. In a jail this year where you're going to get the pandemic. So a lot of these systemic changes can be made so much easier if we had a lot of people, a lot of Democrats voting, because I think it's 16 are on the bench and it takes 9 to get things done. And so I think this is the year to do it.
Well, and that's one of the, we've had almost, I think, the entire democratically endorsed slate of judicial candidates on the show. And, one of the common themes that I've heard there is this issue surrounding, especially transparency, and you've mentioned a couple of a couple of other topics such as bail reform. But for example, there is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that I keep hearing about is that there's no transparency in terms of sentencing, or any kind of a database where I can go and see if, if defendant A and defendant B charged with the same crime, but different personal characteristics, if they're sentenced in the same way. There may be great disparities, but we don't know because there's no transparency to even how that's done. So, in my 26-year police career, these days, because of the efforts of yourself and others, there's a lot of data collection and other things to see if arrests are, out of whack somehow. But once it gets into the once it gets to the courts, we don't know.
Yeah, if an officer has a history of using excessive force and you can track that, then you can correct that or retrain them or get rid of them. And if there's a judge who's sentencing Black defendants to a higher sentence in the longer term than white defendants who are equally situated, the judge should know that, and then they should correct that. And that's part of what the Supreme Court told the entire state to start collecting that data 20 years ago. And the Chief Justice, Maureen O'Connor, is made it her last duty as she leaves the bench, because she'll be term limited or age limited, won't be able to run again. She said for the last 2 years, what she wants to do is make sure that we collect this data statewide. And Hamilton County isn't doing it. And I don't understand why.
So let me just so I'm clear on that, so everybody watching is clear on this. 20 some odd years ago, the Ohio Supreme Court, and I don't know what the mechanism or their ability to enforce this is, but you're saying that the Ohio Supreme Court issued some type of instruction to do this. And here in Hamilton County, which we know that our courthouse has been, until recently, there's been inroads made by the Dems, whether it be hopefully with our next prosecutor, and AFTAB being in the clerk's office, and a couple of judges. We got some more in 2018 and probably a lot more, including yourself in 2020, hopefully. But this is by the Republican-controlled courthouse in Hamilton County, Ohio. They have ignored this direction from the Ohio Supreme Court to collect this data. Maybe they don't want us to see what the data shows. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
I took I've taken a lot, but I took another racial discrimination and how to remedy that in the judicial system, in the legal system. I took another class last week, and the first thing they said was, you have to understand that you can have implicit bias as a judge. Even if you think you are not discriminating, you have to recognize that you could be discriminating. And implicit bias means you think you are being fair, but you can't know until you study it. And that's really the basis of the whole problem. Unless we study it, we don't know. And it is simple. There is an entry for all different kinds of determinations, whether you plead guilty or whether it's a jury verdict. There are these sentencing entries that the court has already established. They want everybody to use them, and then they want them to upload it into the system every day. We already upload some data. Why not upload the right data? And other courts have been doing it. Judges are doing it as they choose, and some counties have decided to do it as a pilot project themselves. Like the entire county, all the judges are doing it. So we should just be in the forefront of that. We're the third largest common pleas court in the state. Why aren't we doing this? It's
a great rhetorical question. And I don't know. I think I maybe hit on at least part of the answers. They don't want to know the answer. And I don't know, maybe there's, I'm a judge. I'm used to being like that kind of, the last word on things. Maybe I don't want folks looking over my shoulder or whatever the case may be. Whatever the reasons are, we need to see this information, especially based on this long history that, by the way, are previously, Republican endorsed Ohio Supreme Court justices, most of them. And again, that's another court where we made some inroads. But even they're telling them to do this, they're still not doing it. But I've consistently heard this theme, and I think that's another reason for folks to get that Dem Slate card and vote all the way down, or start at the bottom and work their way up. We'll talk more about that when we get to campaign specifics. But you touch on a couple of things that I'd really like to touch on. One that you just mentioned is your work around the collaborative agreement. And so, folks, especially outside of Cincinnati, might not know exactly what that means. But with all the challenges that we have these days with police and with criminal justice reform and things around that, this was really a pretty groundbreaking a document, an agreement that came out from here in Cincinnati with the Cincinnati Police Department after, in the late 90s, early 2000s, a number of Black males, many of which were unarmed, were shot and killed. And so we've had some good progress here. And let's talk a little bit about that. What was the collaborative and the basis behind it?
Yeah, 20 Black men had been killed by the Cincinnati police, and there were lawsuits being filed in federal court against Cincinnati Police Department, City of Cincinnati, and Judge DeLotte consolidated them all into one case. And then she brought everybody into a room and had a magistrate from Dayton serve as the mediator. And I remember being in her courtroom, not in her conference room, in her courtroom, because we had so many people, and having the agreement in the terms. We sat there and worked on every word of this 60-page settlement agreement. And when I say we, it was the city, it was Mayor Charlie Lucan, it was FOP president, it was all the lawyers representing all the family members who had been whose loved ones had been killed. So we were talking not just about money. What we were doing was crafting a contract, which is called a settlement agreement, and it was public. It was implemented. The city paid for and hired a monitor to implement this, and it took years for all of the changes to even be decided what they should be. The process involved having people from the community, called all the stakeholders, come forward and speak and say, this is the problem. We don't trust the police. And the police said, well, we don't like that you don't trust us. All right, well, let's talk about that. And how do we fix that? And it took a long time. I think just to implement the first round took 5 years. And now it's been more than 20 years later. The agreement is no longer in effect because the city did everything. Then the mediator said, yes, you've done everything. It took longer than the original 5 years. And now Al and some members of the city and Chief Isaacs are trying to refresh the agreement and bring it back.
And Al being Al Gerhardstein, your partner in your law firm.
Right. I mean, this has been something Al's been working on. It seems like half his career, working for 45 years, and half of it has been with a collaborative. But it is something that makes a difference because all the people involved came together and were able to talk about what they needed and what they wanted to see happen. And we did have, I don't think Al and I had a wrongful shooting death case against the Cincinnati police. There are changes that were made that helped everybody, including training and tracking officers' behavior and being able to hold people accountable. The CCA is a great example because before we had the CCA, the Citizen Complaint Authority, there was a different entity that wasn't effective. And the CCA in the beginning was great. I mean, they really investigated complaints and held officers accountable for violating policies. And that was something that was good for everybody. And I'm glad that the city has brought that back, and Gabe Davis is now the executive director, and that's going to move forward. There are all kinds of things that happen with a collaborative. It's just a shame that more cities don't do this because it really could help everyone.
And that was going to be my follow-up in that, this was kind of a groundbreaking thing here in Cincinnati, and it's really, and we can get into all the specifics, which is kind of outside the scope of this show this evening. But in the number of police shootings and other things, of course, this has been quite a year in 2020, unfortunately, and the civil unrest. We experienced that here in Cincinnati back in that time, in that 2001 timeframe, and really because of your efforts and others, we led on this issue, and I think and are ahead of others in many other ways. However, I think our risk is right now that there's been some foot dragging around this collaborative refresh, kind of renewing this agreement. And I just want to make sure that we don't slide, back. There's always forces trying to kind of pull us back in time. And we need to try to avoid that. Is that your sense of where we stand with it right now?
Yeah, I think it needs leadership, and it needs a commitment from everybody involved to make it move forward. We don't have lawsuits, and the thought that the city could lose millions and millions of dollars, so maybe they should give up some money by giving the family a little bit less in order to get a settlement. Now it has to be motivated, I think, by the voters, by the citizens, by the community, and the leaders on city council. You should have Al Gerhardt on your show.
I would love to have Al on my show. He's a great guy and doing good work in the community. So hopefully we can make that happen after November the 3rd and make sure we get everybody on that's running for office now. But speaking of folks, Kat Weber stopped by to mention that she loves what you're talking about, Jennifer, that you do amazing work. And speaking of some of the amazing work that you have done or been involved with, and I've got the book right here. Most people probably, whether in Cincinnati or across the country, are familiar with the Obergefell case, which was the case that led to marriage equality as the law of the land from the U.S. Supreme Court. Which, quite frankly, right now is at risk subsequent to tonight in a new Supreme Court justice being voted on in the Senate. But for me, Jim Obergefell and John Arthur were my neighbors across the hall, right here where I sit right now. Matter of fact, right outside my window here is Jim Obergefell and John Arthur Way. And with the street named after them, thanks to Councilmember Seelbach. And tell us a little bit about this groundbreaking case, again, emanating from right here in Cincinnati, Ohio.
This is what I love about Cincinnati. It is such a small town. Your neighbors.
It is a big small town or a small big town, one of the two, I'm not sure.
So, the Supreme Court decided the Windsor case, which was the case that preceded this, that said that the federal DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act, the federal law that says people of the same sex can't get married, was unconstitutional. And literally within days, Al was at a party. So this is a real Cincinnati story. He was at a party, and and he said, we got to do something. Now we need to challenge the Ohio law. I don't know how to do it or what to do, and he was just talking with his friends, and they're like, oh, you should meet my I forget, friend, cousin, neighbor, whatever, Jim Obergefell and John Arthur, because they went to, as soon as Windsor came out, they went to Baltimore and got married on the tarmac and told that story. And that's how they met, was through a mutual friend at a party. And we spent like the next month, because that decision came out in June. We spent the month of July with all of our clerks, all of the lawyers in the office, researching and studying and trying to figure out what the heck, how do we bring the same case here in Ohio? And we ended up coming up with this theory that we should take little tiny baby steps, because that's how the Supreme Court makes changes. Brown versus Board of Education overturned a case that said separate but equal was okay in school. It took 50 years for that law to be overturned. And so we thought we were going to take little baby steps and filed on behalf of John and Jim, because the sad reality was that when John died, his death certificate that's issued by the city of Cincinnati was going to say he was unmarried, and it was going to say he had no spouse. And that's all because of the state law that we had in Ohio that wouldn't recognize a marriage out of state, and a state constitutional amendment that the voters passed. We had two DOMA laws in the Constitution and the statute. And we went to court. Judge gave us a quick, great decision. We ended up filing the next month another case. Nobody really realizes this, but there were three cases, this is a trilogy. John's case and Jim's case was to get the death certificate in Cincinnati changed.
Right, and just so I can just kind of refresh people's memories on that just a bit. John was very sick with ALS. And so when they had the opportunity before he passed, because it was very important to them that Jim be listed as a spouse on the death certificate, they flew on a medevac kind of plane, because it was just so sad to watch. John was just in a wheelchair when they moved in across the hall from me and a neighbor, and you could just see the ravages of that disease take their toll. And so they flew, and as you mentioned, literally got married on the tarmac of the airport, had to go to a state where the state had legalized it, got married there, and then coming back to Ohio, then that document was not being recognized as a legal document in the state of Ohio, even though they got legally married in Maryland. Am I remembering that correctly?
That's exactly right. So our goal was just to get the city of Cincinnati to change their death certificate and stop following the unconstitutional law in Ohio. And, the city didn't defend it, which you got to love the city for, because we sued the city because they issued the death certificate and they didn't defend it. The state did. Right. The states defended it.
Of course.
Yeah. But then we filed a lawsuit on behalf of families who adopted. We wanted the birth certificate to have mom and mom are married. And then we filed a lawsuit for people who wanted to get a marriage license, so that the marriage license wouldn't say bride and groom, it would say bride and bride, or groom and groom. And so all three of those cases were all pending. And as a result, things moved really quickly, because the case in the history of my career, I've never seen a case get filed and decided in 2 years. That's astronomically quick, and that's because there were a lot of brilliant lawyering and maneuvering going on. But other states across the country were doing the same thing. We weren't the only lawyers who were thinking this up. It was happening all over the country, and all over the country, those state laws are being held unconstitutional. Every single one was getting struck down, except for Ohio. Here we are in Ohio, and the Court of Appeals, Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, said, nope, we are not going to agree with your decisions that you've been getting. And that's what sent it to the United States Supreme Court. If the Sixth Circuit had allowed our decision to go forward, there wouldn't have been a Supreme Court case. But because they ruled against us, we were able to get to the Supreme Court. And it was, one of those days. You don't know when the Supreme Court's going to rule. In June, they issue all their really difficult decisions. So every day in June that they might issue a decision, we thought today's the day, and we all ran to our computers at 10 a.m. to see if the decision was going to be today. And somehow, Al, I still don't know how this has happened, but Al found out that decision day was going to be the next day on a Friday, and he and Jim flew to Washington, were in the Supreme Court. They were sitting there when the decision was announced and the summary was read in the courtroom, which was so exciting. And our other clients were in our office, in our conference room watching, and in Cincinnati, because not everybody could go to DC. And It was, the most exciting day as a lawyer, because I usually represent people who've been discriminated against or killed or maimed or harmed. In this day, we ended the day, I don't know if you remember this, but Scott Knox had a brilliant idea that we would just announce to the world that at 4:30 on decision day, there would be a mass wedding on Fountain Square. Go run to the probate court and get your marriage license and come on down. And we had a wedding. 5 couples came and got married. Mayor Cranley did the wedding and did the ceremony, and one couple brought their rabbi, and our office had champagne and wedding cake and flowers for everybody. And it was, you know, as a civil rights lawyer, I have to say that was the most fun I've ever had with a verdict.
And it's an amazing story, and a big part of everything that you're talking about in this kind of fight, you know, for the little guy and girl, repressed folks, whatever it may be. You know, it was truly a time where we're simply allowing people who love each other to get married. But the joy that you saw come out of that for so many folks was truly amazing. And for myself, on a personal note, being a straight ally to the LGBTQ plus community, I subsequently then got to be a best man I mentioned my friend council member Steelbach, who renamed the street after Obergefell, and I was the best man in a wedding. So it was just awesome, and it's one of those things where we look back and say, really, I mean, people love each other, they can't get married, consenting adults. It's just kind of crazy. But what's your sense right now? And you know, and then we're going to move on and talk specifically about the campaign right now that's going on. But just as a final point, because it's timely, what's your sense now with this new Supreme Court justice, and like what are the risks here? And I'm not sure that in 2016 everybody fully grasped the risks, and now we have 45 appointing 3 Supreme Court justices over the past 4 years.
No, not just that. I mean, every district court judge in Cincinnati, because yeah. I mean, if you think about it, Mitch McConnell did a great job to keep Obama from appointing judges at the trial level, the Court of Appeals level, and the Supreme Court level for 6 of his 8 years. Obama was in office 8 years and appointed 2 judges to our Court of Appeals. Within the first 2 years of Trump's administration, he appointed 6 or 7 judges to the Court of Appeals. And so it's at all levels of the federal court have Trump appointees. And I'm worried that the precedent here, you know, they're always asking the Supreme Court nominees about Roe v. Wade, which was 1973, and it's been, you know, almost 50 years. This is good law, right? Well, Obergefell's 5 years old. It hasn't had a long tenure, and they used this phrase in the hearings with Judge Barrett last week. Super precedent. I never heard that phrase before. I've been practicing law for 33 years. What's a super precedent? Precedent is precedent. If the court says this is unconstitutional, it's unconstitutional. Right. Super about it. So I'm that made me worried. Just that phrase and that term, and the thought that something could be a short-term decision could more easily be overturned. So right. I'm worried.
Well, and it seems clear, you know, on the right that really their sole focus is not sole focus perhaps, but like a big part of the focus is definitely on the judiciary, right? And so that's the importance, and this kind of segues now into here we are in Hamilton County and your race and others, just how important these judgeships are. And one of the things that we've continued to talk about is the fact that even though the parties endorse in judicial races, technically they're nonpartisan, and so and we want to have theoretically supposed to have an independent judiciary. But when you go in to vote, there's no D or R by the judge's name. So we need to make sure that everybody, we had over 5,500 people early voting on Saturday, which is amazing, but that they're going in and they have a slate, right? And they know who our judges are. Do you think we've been, and I was involved in some of the field work in 2018 when we made some headway and some progress in that regard and kind of pushing the slate out, but I'm seeing a lot more of it now. Do you think that's been going well?
I think it's been going great. I got, I think, 4 different pieces of mail myself with the whole judicial slate on it.
Just in case you didn't know, in case you forgot any of your slate, mate.
I sent an email to the other 12 candidates this morning, And I'm like, wait, I'm counting all the names, in the 2 box. I'm like, I'm missing somebody. Who am I missing? Uh, there are a lot of us. But Al and I had a lawsuit. We represented ASME, and we sued Jennifer Brunner when she was Secretary of State. She was not bad. She was a great Secretary of State, but she was in that role because we were trying to say that state law that keeps the D and the R off the judicial ballot is unconstitutional. It's a first violation. Yeah.
So this is the first time I've heard about this case. What
10 years ago?
Tell me a little bit more.
Well, it is just a First Amendment argument. We represented ASME, the Ohio Democratic Party, and 3 judges. And we said that they all had a First Amendment right to inform their people, whether it's the candidate informing the voters, the party informing their members, ASME informing their members, who's a Democrat, and it needs to be on the ballot. It was a First Amendment violation. We lost in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. We did not take it on to the Supreme Court. And so the state law that calls this a nonpartisan race, meaning on the ballot, the party is not identified, is constitutional and is in effect. So you didn't hear about it because we lost.
Right.
We had won, so, we would have known.
Is it that way in all 50 states, or there are other states where the judges do have?
Ohio is unique because we run a primary that is partisan, right? We had 2 judicial candidates who ran against another Democrat in their primary. Right. So we make judges be partisan in the primary, but we don't let them be partisan, or at least inform their voters. It's odd. I think it's a mistake, because what we learned in that litigation was that voters want to know party because that's the #1 thing they use when they don't know the candidate. And right. Now we've got all these people voting from home, and you can open up your phone or your laptop or your computer, and you can look everybody up and decide for yourself. So maybe voting right. from home and early voting will change that statistic, but most people don't know who the judges are, and so they choose by party. And if you right. see, I mean, are you out campaigning? Are you seeing the yard signs and the billboards and the flyers from the Republicans? They're all blue.
Yeah, I mean, no, they're running away. They're running away from the R, yeah. Trying to play all kind of games to be anything, putting their signs in blue. You pretty much use anything but red, which we would typically associate with the Republican Party. And yeah, hiding from it. And we've even have cases now in Hamilton County as our county continues to trend very blue of it, but like I'm hearing reports of like a blatantly candidates are lying and saying, no, I'm not one of those R's. No, I'm not that. Of course, they take the money from the Republican donors, but in the streets out and about, they're running away from it. And so I agree with you. I think we're having a lot of success of pushing that slate out there, but it just seems like a very arcane rule, kind of like, I have to call and make fundraising calls for a campaign, but I'm not allowed to actually ask for money. It's a weird thing. I'm not sure.
So I just saw a comment from my paralegal, Sydney.
Sydney, yeah. I think Sydney I saw she shared my post of the preview post of this coming up. I think she was very excited to have you on here tonight. So that's great. Hey, Sydney.
Campaign, but it's just interesting that voters crave information. I mean, every year when I'm not running, people call me and say, "Who am I supposed to vote for judge?" Because they call their lawyer friends who can help them sort that out. So I don't understand why we don't put that on there. And who can change that is the legislature. So there's a Democratic legislature and a Democratic governor that should be at the top of their agenda.
Indeed, and I think a big part of all of this is just not having that drop off as we get to the various down ballot races, especially the judges, because you walk in, you don't have that slate card. If you don't have a smartphone, if you're going to vote, not at home, but in person someplace, and I get down to the judges, I'm like, now what? Like, I just don't vote, or I flip a coin, or do something. So I think we're making some progress.
I heard a voter say they went. This was so many years ago in the polling place. She went over to the garbage can and pulled out the pink sample ballot and voted for everybody who was the opposite.
Well, I mean, that's one way to do it. Yeah, very industrious, whatever works. My buddy Tony Edwards stopping by, and he's just talking about people's assumptions about if you're blue or if you're red. And I guess that's kind of ostensibly, the concept here is that I don't want to have to worry about if I'm a well-known person of the other party and coming before this judge that of course if we had this data that we're trying to make more visible, we might know if people are being sentenced differently, but just that everybody's fair, and that when we walk in there, just because of it's not a partisan thing in terms of a sentence, that's another criteria that we need to look at. I guess is their plausible excuse, but it's just interesting this when you see the lack of transparency and kind of these arcane games that are played. But then you see the popular opinion seems to be on the other side. So I'm not sure.
Totally agree. The judges should not be deciding things based on someone's party, their party or the litigant's party. That's terrible. That's not what judges should do. But the system that our state has set up doesn't make any sense. Why are we partisan in the primary but not in the general? Why just make everybody an independent?
Right.
And then they can run on different topics and not base it on I'm blue or I'm red. And I ran in 2014 as an independent because I didn't even run until after the primary. So I was endorsed by the Democratic Party, but I didn't win a primary as a Democrat. So I was careful in what I said. Sorry, my kitty cat just came in. That's your Zoom cat that you have to have on every Zoom call. So Derek, I think I lost you. Oh, so he told me his computer froze, so I am hanging on. All right, well, that's fine. So let me just say that Election Day is a week away. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe that. And if you haven't already voted in by mail, you can ask for your absentee ballot. You can drop off the request at the board, but I would recommend that if you're going to be voting by mail this late, that you should drop it off your sample ballot at the Board of Elections, and you can do that on Election Day.
Sorry about that, guys. I had a major malfunction here. My computer just died in the midst of everything. So I apologize. I apologize for that, but it happens. What can I say? And let me see if I can get Jennifer back on here real quick. All right, we got Jennifer back. Sorry about that.
We lost everybody.
no, we still got people hanging in with us. It happens. My computer crashed. I apologize. I think what it's telling me is it's been going for quite a while now, so it needs a break from all of this. But I think you were just in the
my cat scared you away.
No, I'm sorry, I missed the cat. Yeah, Kat mentioned. Yeah, Josie's around here someplace. But anyway, sorry about that. We're back. So let's pick up where you left off. I think you were telling us about the slate card.
Oh, I was talking about the slate. Yeah, because it's the only way for voters to really understand a lot about a person by knowing what party they're affiliated with. But I think this time, in 2020, all of us Democratic endorsed candidates have been talking about reforming the justice system in our courthouse because we've got racial disparities. We recognize the racial disparities. We want to fix them. We've all taken implicit bias training. We know that people, including ourselves, are biased. The last time I took that test, the Harvard test, you can just Google it, implicit bias test, Harvard, and take it. I was biased against a group I belong to, which totally shocked me, because usually you're biased in favor of the groups you belong to.
Right.
But one of the things you can test for is weight, thin people and fat people. And I took that test and I was surprised that I was biased against fat people. So that's good to know, because I didn't realize that. And so if I'm a judge and I am sentencing two people to the same crime, I want to make sure that I am not holding one person to a different standard. So it's
no, and I think that in the bigger picture, I think some of that self-reflection and looking at that, I mean, we're all human beings, right? But just having that awareness and that self-awareness, and not being afraid to, even ask tough questions of yourself is it's a very admirable quality, and I think one that makes you extremely qualified for a seat on the Hamilton County Common Pleas Court.
I hope so. So I hope everybody comes out and votes. And it looks like 50% of the voters may vote early, either in person or by mail. So.
No, that's great. We're blowing the doors off it here in Hamilton County, and I think much of that is due to kind of the grassroots efforts, not only the volunteers, and not only the party, and of course my good friend and former campaign manager for my 2017 council race, Eddie Davenport, now leading us from the front from the Hamilton County Democratic Party perspective. But also all of the candidates who are out there. I see all the judicial candidates out to the extent we can safely in these COVID days, pushing that slate. And it's really something to see when, a number of years ago, not that long ago, we didn't even have, you mentioned the 13 seats, we didn't even have candidates, running, opposing, and they've run unopposed. And so they've gotten fat and happy sitting up there doing whatever they want.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, several of the ones that are running now have never had to raise money in campaign, and and this is a crazy year to be campaigning because can't really very many voters.
Right. No, it's good stuff. So who's this now? Who do we have here?
This is Xena, the Princess Warrior.
Hey, Xena.
I adopted.
I always love a cat cameo.
From my backyard in Kennedy Heights, and she rewarded me by biting me in the back of my ankle. That's why she's. Yeah.
Well, I think she's ready for some attention as well, probably some dinner. So we're going to let you go. But Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I've really appreciated the conversation, learning more about the Obergefell case and some others from your perspective. And we look forward to just a great night here a week from Tuesday and welcoming you to the bench. Now, I know you, because of our arcane laws that we have here in Ohio, you're not allowed to ask, but I am. There are still everybody go on branchforjudge.com and drop Jennifer a contribution, whatever it is you can afford. I know we've been donating to races probably maybe even nationally, but these are very important here in Hamilton County, Cincinnati, Ohio. So we certainly ask everyone to do that. and follow you. I'm on your Twitter. I believe that is Branch for Judge as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And so that's where to find Jennifer.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, sir.
yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for joining us tonight, Jennifer. And I'll just give you the last word for any closing comments.
Vote, and vote early. That's all I have to say. And thank you. Thanks for having all the judges on. That's great.
No, it's been amazing. We have such a wonderful slate, and I've learned so much as well, and as we did again tonight. So thank you so much. For me, everyone, at Derek Bauman. You can find this on YouTube, Twitter at Derek Bauman, Facebook, obviously, and we appreciate everybody joining us tonight. Be safe, and as Jennifer mentioned, vote. Go vote. If you have your ballot, get it returned, get it in the mail, drop it off at the Board of Elections at our one Dropbox location, but that's another story. And make sure you do vote. And we will keep our fingers crossed for now and see what happens from the Supreme Court level. But Jennifer, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you on the bench here in Hamilton County.
Thanks, Derek.
All right. Have a great night, everybody. Be safe.